All right, we're back. It is COMP3025, and it's the winter 2016 semester, week 2, lesson 2, part 2. We just talked about IB actions and IB outlets, which are the methods that we use to create connections between our storyboard and our view controller or other controllers, right? That's what we do with them. Okay, so let's get into some of the other stuff we want to talk about here. So back to this. So if we follow the PowerPoint presentation, the things we need to do, it talks about making mistakes. This is where we left off last week with auto layout. We created, our UI. When I declare outlets again, what I want to do is I want to drag and drop. I want to control click from our storyboard again across into our view controller. That's what I'm doing. I'm control clicking, right? And then when you create an IB outlet, notice how over here you have a couple of things. This is right from the PowerPoint, right? So one of the things that you got in the IB outlet is it declares it as a variable here. This is in the book, right? Notice I have a variable declaration here. If I go back to Xcode, here's our variable declaration. So when we use Swift, remember we're learning Swift today. So it's kind of like I'm using this to learn Swift, and we're going to do Swift in a playground as well, right? So when we use a var, the var statement, and this is where some people say, well, you know what? Swift reminds me a lot of JavaScript, right? Because you're using var, right, to declare a variable. And you're using let, which is, by the way, also acceptable in JavaScript in the latest version, ES6, ECMAScript 6 or JavaScript 2016. Let is another keyword we use. We don't use it for constants in JavaScript. We use it for so that the variables don't get hoisted, right? And we'll talk about that. It's a totally different thing for JavaScript to Swift. So you might be fooled in saying, well, if I have my var declaration, that means I can redeclare my variables in Swift and everything else, just like I do in JavaScript because it's loosely typed. And you'd be wrong. JavaScript is loosely typed. Swift has strong typing, as type safety is what they call it, right? And the reason for that is if I was to look at this question label, which is of type UI label, and this is an exclamation mark here. There's a reason why this is an exclamation mark. And it's part of the whole idea of optionals. We'll talk about what this is. I'm actually unwrapping an optional here. I'm force unwrapping an optional by using an exclamation mark. So again, this is a little bit of different syntax that you've never seen before, right? If you've actually looked at other syntax like JavaScript or C#, Java, whatever, this decorator, the exclamation mark, is an indicator for us in Swift that we're force unwrapping an optional. And you're like, what the hell is he talking about, right? Force unwrapping an optional. And by the way, for the most part, for optionals, it's not recommended that we do that, except when, and this is the exceptions, this is why we have them, we're using UI. We make weak connections, like it says here, between our UI, our storyboard, and our view controller. All right, so that's what we're doing here. So whenever you see this exclamation mark, think about it as us unwrapping an optional, force unwrapping, because exclamation mark is like almost like we're force unwrapping an optional. So UI label is an optional component, an optional, what was it again? So question label would be an optional, variable, and we're force unwrapping it. We're making it so we can use it, right? And we'll talk about force unwrapping later, right? So even if you don't understand, it's okay. We're going to go into the details of why in a bit, but I want to show you this. Yes?
So you're saying that having the UI label type there is optional, or
No, the type the question label itself is optional.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. Okay. This is just the syntax to unwrap it. Yes.
So does it have to be? Do you have to have weak there if you're force unwrapping?
Yes. If I take the week away, let's try this out. So take a week away. And as an example, it doesn't complain right now. And if I take this exclamation mark away, which is the piece that force unwraps it, I get this error, right? And if I click on the error, right, to see what it is, it says IB outlet property has a non-optional type UI label, right? Fix it, add a question mark to form the optional type UI label, or fix it, add a exclamation mark to form the implicitly unwrapped optional or force unwrapped optional type UI label, which is what I want to do. So there's actually a fix. And you see these new fixes. These are part of actually Swift 2. We didn't have these fixes before. And in Xcode 7, they've come up with some of this stuff. So if I click on this, double click on this, it'll actually put it back to the way it was. The one thing it won't do is it won't put back my weak strong reference. So it's a reference. There's two different references, weak and strong. So I'm going to take my reference away and see if it functions the same way, because you mentioned that someone mentioned I don't need a weak, do I need the weak reference or whatever, so if I'm forcing wrapping it. Let's check it out. All right, so if I run it, it succeeds, right? And for the most part, when I click it, it does what it's supposed to do. So everything's good, right? Even though I don't have my weak reference. When I call it weak, it's a memory thing, right? Weak, strong, right? A weak reference is like, it's basically saying I may or may not have this connection, right? Strong reference is like pointer, right? That I'm pointing to that object. It's a different way of doing things. And we'll talk about weak, strong references later on. Okay, but let's put it back the way it was, just to conform with what we would do. And you don't have to touch it. I mean, if you just drag and drop, click, drag and drop, it creates this connection and all the code you need to make it work, right? So we did that piece. I'm just going to go into the main storyboard for a second to make sure that you see it. So, I mean, again, now they notice that you, here's the other way to create a connection. Control drag, right, from the view controller in the document outline to the top label in the scene, right? So notice what they're doing. They're clicking here and they're moving it over here. And it's different than what we did. We control dragged, we created it, we pulled up our assistant editor. By the way, to me, it's far easier than what they're doing, right? In the book. Pull up your assistant editor, which is that little the circles, just like we did before, this thing here. You have your storyboard here, you have your view controller here, and you just pull it across. It's much easier than doing it the other way. When we do it the other way, you're still doing the same thing. You're still creating an outlet or an action, right? But you're not seeing the effects on the view controller until you put up the view controller document itself. And they do the same thing for the label. So when they pull it across, and look what they've done. When I pull up the first one, they've called it the question label. They pull the second one up, they call it the answer label. Right? So that's the second one we did. So did we do the second one? Here's my question label. Let's do the same thing for our answer label. So I'm going to just, again, click, drag. I'm going to put it underneath the question label just to keep it the same as what they have. So question label, click, drag just underneath here. I can put it wherever I want in my class. Notice that I can't put it up here. I can't click up here and I can't put it up here. Because, and I mean, again, this makes sense, right? Because here, I'm actually outside of my class definition. So it would be like, what would it be? A global variable? That's not going to make any sense. So it has to be inside the reference of my class. So I'm going to put it right below my question label. I'm going to make it an outlet. It's going to be a weak story. Look at the strong or weak connection, right? So I'm going to choose weak. And then it's going to be of type UI label, and I'm going to name it answer label, right? Okay, so there's our connection. So first what you do is you create your references. And let's get rid of that. How about if I want to get rid of my IB outlet? I want to get rid of this IB outlet for the next question button. I don't need that. How do I get rid of it? Anyone know? Gentlemen? How do I get rid of my... Okay, I'm going to ask you guys now. How do I get rid of my IB outlet from my... I mean, I've got a connection. If I hover over these in the gutter, notice how I have a connection for my button. So I can change the button text. And I'm going to just get rid of that now because that's not part of what we're doing here. And I'll get rid of all this stuff in our next question clicked. Just for a second, right? So, but how do I get rid of this? Is it okay if I just delete it?
Nope.
What happens when I delete it?
It'll start searching for it. You can't find
All right, let's take a look. If I just delete it like this, right? And you know, it's gone. Notice how it's gone inside the gutter as well, right? If I save it and now I do my build, right? And not complain. Everything's good, right? So I've got this my build, you know, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I got an error, right? And down in here, this is called, and you normally this is a crash, right? Normally we call it a crash, right? So this is what we call in iOS a trap, right? Trap is what we call it, right? So when we get a crash, the iOS operation crash, it's a trap. And why? Because, you know, we're trying to find the next question, you know, this key for the next question button, just like you're saying, and there's no connection. We can't find it. Now, if it's not apparent to you what it is, right? Because there's nothing that says there's an error inside my view controller. I'm showing you this error because you might run across this if you do some kind of weird deletion, right? All right, let's go back. So I'm going to stop debugging to get me back to my other view, right? Okay, and I'm back from my debug session, so I'm not debugging anymore. And oh man, what happened? I've lost my view again, right? So I got to go back to my storyboard, right? Click on my main storyboard for this one. Get rid of this one, right? Go over here, and then I still don't see my, any kind of errors here. The gutter has nothing in there. Well, how can I check this out?
Couldn't you just hit the back button on the upper left?
Maybe. Like up here you're talking about.
Yeah.
I could have, right? But let's go back to pull this in. How can I detect that there's a connection? Where do I have that connection? Yeah.
Well, it's going to be in your hierarchy.
Okay, let's take a look at my hierarchy. I like your thinking.
It might be in your properties of the object.
All right, so here's my hierarchy, and Jeremy, I'll come back to you in a second. So, okay, I don't see any connections in there. So, yes.
Object properties.
Click on the button
Okay, let's just get rid of this. So I'm going to just hide this thing. And this is what I want you guys to think about. If I've just killed my connection, so right click on the button, yeah, and then
There it is.
under sentiments at the bottom. There's a little text in the right side.
so right, are you saying right here, referenced outlets for net? Oh, okay, you're saying this one over here. So view controller next question click this one, touch up inside. No, that's we want that one because that's this one. Next question clicked, right? We don't want to get rid of this one, right? Remember, this is an action sent events, right? Here's our outlet, our view controller next question button, right? The next question button which creates our object. So this is one way. If I delete this one, I'm not going to do it right now. This is one way of doing it. What's another way of doing this? There's another way of doing it without right clicking. That's a good way though. I like it. Any other way you can think of? So let's go back. So if I click on this thing and I go back and I change this our menu back to what it was, so I get rid of this and I want to bring back my property inspector, which is on the right. So I've got my button clicked now. If I click my button, as an example, I see a context-sensitive menu on the right-hand side, right? Notice how I have a couple of other inspectors here. I have my size inspector, right? Tells me the size of my button. And on the right, what's this? I have my connections inspector. So if I click on my connections inspector, I see the same thing. So even though you don't see an error, when you delete an object in your view controller, just because you delete it doesn't mean the connection is not being searched for, because what is this inspector stuff anyway? Where are they getting this connection? I don't see it in my code. How do they know? How does is it, I don't know, some kind of UI that I have in the background I'm working? What is it doing? What does this represent, this connection? Anybody have an idea? Other than Sam. Someone else answer my question. Okay, I'm going to start asking people on the other side here, right? So what would this be? What would this connection represent, right? Come on, guys. Tyler, tell me what it is.
What I mean?
Yeah, you.
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. That's a good answer. Jean-Claude, any ideas? What would the connection be? It can't be just a UI connection, right? There's got to be something in the background, some kind of file or file type that gives me some information, right? What would you guess it would be? Some code behind file, and let's recommend it's probably something like an XML or JSON file. Okay, that's what I'm recommending. Some kind of metadata that's in the background that you don't see, that's hidden from us. All right, that's holding data to make that connection. So what happens is when you do a build, what am I really doing when I do a build? I'm compiling and making my application. This is not like when we do things for, well, it's kind of like when we do things for C# and for Java, but it's an actual build and compile. So what it does is it looks for, if you remember, anyone who knows any kind of C language programming, back in the old day, when we made our makefile, right, we actually literally had to search for each module to create our folder. We created a batch file to do that. Well, the batch file is still here. It's just hidden. It's part of this project, right? So this is just like C. So it's looking for this stuff that's not there because we've removed it from our view controller without saying anything to Xcode, right? So it's going, hey, where is this? And now it's creating this trap. Sorry to say the trap thing because I know people saying you just crashed your application. It's a crash. It's a trap, right? Okay, that's what we're going to call. That's what it's called.
It seems to me,
yeah.
and maybe there's a reason for it which you can explain.
Yeah.
This seems to me like a big oversight though in Xcode. If you do this in Visual Studio, if you put an object on there, and you have code referencing that object, you remove the reference to that object, Visual Studio is going to show you all of the places in the application that are referencing that object that you've now changed the name or removed. Here, it doesn't tell you. You've got to go and then find those references on your own. That
You're
seems
right.
like a major oversight.
You're right. But remember that this IDE, Xcode, which is, some people love it and some people don't like it. Some people have stronger feelings, negative against it, right? It's been built up from using Objective-C, right? And it's gone through a transformation. So the stuff you're seeing here is probably required for something they need to do in Objective-C. 99% of the time when I ask this kind of question, and I look it up on Google and say, why doesn't it get rid of the referencing? Because somewhere in there, Objective-C needs you to do blah, blah. That's what it needs, right? And we're going to see that when we do Swift today. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to say, because of Objective-C, we need to do this, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense, right? And that's probably what it is, okay? Because I'm sure other people complained about it, not just us, right? Okay, so let's get rid of it. So let's click on the X over here to get rid of this outlet. And now that the outlet's gone, if I build my application, it should build no problem and not crash. All right, that's what we will hopefully will see. It won't be a trap. We won't run into our trap, right? Okay, let's stop debugging for a second. Okay, cool. So that's one of the things I wanted to cover with you today, because you're going to see that kind of stuff happen all the time. So I want to get back my view. I'm going to go here to View, Swift. I'm going to click on my assistant editor, which is on the other side, right? So I'm going to go back. Let's go back here, main storyboard, and then I want to see my assistant editor. There it is. I want to get rid of this one and this one, so I don't see those things anymore. And I've got everything the way it was before, right? Okay, cool. So I don't have that anymore. And you know what? I have my next question clicked. And chances are, guess what? We're probably going to have to get rid of this too, right? So if I go back to my PowerPoint, again, just to follow along to make sure we got everything. Again, they do things in a slightly different way, but the result is the same, okay? Okay, so cool. We've got that and everything else. And then when the UI button is tapped, it calls a method or some kind of another object like we showed you. And then notice how it says, these are the two methods. Hey, take a look at this. How come they have this underscore colon? You're going to see this a lot, by the way, in the book, if you have to read the book. Underscore colon for this. This is just an indication of a method. All right, that's how they kind of outline a method. I'm used to just seeing this, right? That's a method, but they actually put the underscore colon in there to indicate that there's a method. By the way, when we run methods or functions in Swift, it's going to surprise you what they look like, right? They don't look like you think. And the way we reference parameters and all that stuff is totally different than any other language, yeah, except for Objective-C.
With underscore colon, you're basically just defining like a parameter that's unused.
Yes, and the underscore can also say don't name the parameter. We're going to see the underscore come into play. If I put the underscore into play at some point, if I use the underscore in some places, it'll say don't worry, don't ask me for that parameter. It's a decorator. Think of it that way, right? It's something. I know you're going to shake your head at it because it's another syntax. So Swift is loaded with this stuff, and where does it come from? Objective-C. On the back end, it's Objective-C. We still have a lot of stuff going on the back end where we're trying to make it so it's fully backwards compatible and it can work with Objective-C. So there's a lot of throwbacks, right, that we're going to see. We're going to say, well, that's Objective-C. For example, NS string. If I say NS string, NS, the words IB come from Interface Builder. NS comes from next step. Next step. And next step was the language that Objective-C was derived from, right? Because Objective-C has gone through a history, an evolution, right, from a language called next step, right, or Smalltalk. Smalltalk back in the day, you guys don't remember because you weren't born back then, right? Smalltalk was the original language that Apple was using back in the day, right? And it was really a difficult language to use. And the prevalence and the rise of C, right, they wanted to have a C-like language for them to have application developers, right? So they mishmashed, they kind of bought Smalltalk, Apple did, and then they created this Objective-C language, which comes from Smalltalk and something else, C, right? And now we have this other thing called Next Step, where they bought this other thing called Next Step, which is another language. So Smalltalk and Next Step kind of combine or smash together to create Objective-C. So next step, when you see NS string, that comes from that old throwback,
Yeah.
you know, 20 years ago kind of thing, that where they got that. That's where it comes from. And it's an Objective-C way of declaring a string reference. Right, so you're going to see that all throughout. If you actually look at other people's code, NS string, look for that. If you see NS, it means next step. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So this is what our view controller's got to look like now. Notice how I have my show next question and show answer. Those are the IB actions, which means I've got to rename my action. How do I rename? Can I rename this next question clicked? And in Visual Studio, I would just have to kind of right click and then I want to refactor rename, right? How do I do it here? Yes, Sam.
So I would use the Explorer pane, the what do you call it? The
Navigator
context
page.
specific.
Oh, you're talking about the inspector?
Yeah, the inspector, and I would change the name that it references to.
Okay, that's one. How about if I right click here? That's what we would normally do. Right click, and I want to refactor, kind of refactor, and I want to rename. Can I do that? Let's try that out and see if it fails. I want to text this up because someone's gonna try this, right? And I want to see what happens, right? Yeah.
Where's the property that associates the button with the function?
You're talking about what's the where the file you're talking about itself?
Like, where's the option that associates?
When I click drag, you mean?
No, when you click the button,
Yes.
where's the function?
We just made it. That's called the action. IB action
I
is
know,
the
but how does this associate?
with some kind of meta file in the background that compiles and builds and creates the connection between your view and your view controller. That's what happens, right? Okay, so let's take a look. So if I rename this thing like how it should be, it says the selection is unknown. Xcode can only refactor C in Objective-C code. I'm just saying. I'm showing you. So if you try it out, right? Someone's going to try this stuff out. It's there, and you're like, hold on. It supports C and Objective-C, but doesn't support Swift.
Come on, let's go.
This is Swift 2, by the way, and that's why Swift is evolving, right? You're going to probably see a Swift 3 or the next version of Swift coming out soon, and the reason for it is because it's an evolving language. It's a living language. It's not like a language like Fortran or COBOL, especially COBOL. That's kind of dead, right? It hasn't been changed for a long, long time, right? Even some other languages like C++ has evolved. C++ 14 now, right? That's the latest version of C++, right? And even languages like C# and Java have evolved. Java 8, the latest version of C# with ASP.NET 5, right? Or 6 now that's come out, right? So every time these languages are still evolving. JavaScript, ECMAScript 6 or whatever, and the most evolving language they say is Swift. Swift is still evolving, and there's stuff like last version of Swift didn't have any kind of error handling built in. There was no error handling built into Swift. So if you ever try to do any kind of exception handling in Swift in version 1, didn't exist. Right? And you're like, how can they not have exception handling in a language? It's part of our language, right? Well, this is the thing. So I can't do it here, right? And I like your thinking. So there's a couple of really, brute force ways to do it. Brute force way, delete your connection, right? Delete this like we did before. Delete your connections so we did in connections and you're done, right? It's just deleted. There's no connection, right? And then just do the connection again. Control drag and then you're done. Now what's your way? What are you thinking?
I was thinking what I would do is I would just rename the function in the code, and then
okay, let's try that.
rename the reference.
First, let's
delete the reference.
First, let's do what you said. So I'm going to rename the function so it says show next question, right? So show next question. So we'll do that. So hold on a second here. Hold on, how come?
Gotcha.
Oh, I hate when it does that. Arrgh. Yeah, now I'm locked out for some reason or another. Okay.
Excellent.
Looks like I can't change the name. I can. How about adding stuff in there? Right? I can't even add it. Oh, I love it.
What did you do? You break the computer?
I probably just have a put a key sequence in that'll lock my keyboard.
There we go.
Did it work for you?
Yeah,
Right.
so I clicked a button somewhere and it just. I think
Look at
what
this.
I did was I.
I bet you have to get. I wonder if it's like locked. Like it's happened to me before too. So if I go here, can I touch?
Just Xcode.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's just that's why I'm checking. Right, so I'm just gonna sorry guys, I need to stop Xcode for a second and then come back. So I'm gonna quit Xcode and I'm gonna reopen Xcode and just to get back. Sometimes it happens. Remember I told you to be patient at the beginning of the first class? I said, please be patient. He's gonna get something's gonna break, it's not gonna work like you think, and all that kind of stuff.
The Macs aren't supposed to break.
They don't break. I'm talking about the way we develop, you have to be very flexible. So tell me what you did, Sam. I want to share it with the class.
So I changed the name of the function in the code, the view controller.swift.
Okay, so we change it to next. What is it again? Show next question. Show next question. Sorry, a little bit distracted there. All right, so here we go. So we're going to do that. So we're going to go in here and say show next question. You know what I did? It's when I go back and forth between the two things. Hold on a second. Show next
Are you
question.
in a VM right now? Or?
No, absolutely not. Because when I go here and I go back there, I lose my context, my reference, and I can't click onto it no matter what I do. Right? It's really weird. And I'm native. I'm native Mac, right? So, anyways, like I said, I take a deep breath with this stuff, kind of guys, right? Because you know what? It's not the first or the last time that it's ever going to happen. Like Visual Studio doesn't lock up on me, yeah, or something like that. I mean, it happens all the time, right? Huh? Oh yeah.
Everybody never locks up.
All right, so here we go. So show next question. I can't access it. Look, I'm telling you, I can't do it. I can't modify my stuff, right? Here, how about this? How about we get rid of this and we go into this and just do it by hand here. Yay.
So I changed it.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. Show next question. Show next question is what we're going to call this thing, right? Here it is. So that's the first thing you did. Sam, what's the next thing you did?
With my cursor in the body of the method, the function. I
Okay.
went to my main storyboard.
Oh, so I have to bring my storyboard up again? All right, so here's my
Take that side by
storyboard,
side.
and I'll bring it side by side again. There we go. And then,
And then I right click on the next question in the button.
oh, look at this. Look. Look, there's the thing in the gutter, right, which tells me I don't have a connection anymore. right?
So I right click on the next button, next question button.
Up here?
No, on the actual button itself.
Up here?
And then, yeah.
Yeah, okay, next.
And then I clicked plus inside the circle,
In this touch up inside over here?
and then it adds it.
Oh, you're talking about doing one of these. Yeah, that's another way to do it. So what you do is you kind of hover over. Notice how when I hover over here, it doesn't work, but I hover over the actual body of the thing, the whole thing highlights like this, and I'm just changing my connect action.
Yep. And then I click the X in the next question for the next question.
Okay, so you're kind of doing what I would do in one step. That's what you're doing.
All right, Tom. So what you got?
No, it works, for sure, it works. I know that it would work. And okay, so again, we talked about this connection between one and the other. You can't right-click. The one thing I want to specify here is you cannot right-click and refactor rename. It doesn't work. And this is the thing that, like we talked about, Xcode is another beast of its own, and so is Swift, and it's still evolving, and some of this stuff won't work. My problem is another problem. It's not your problem. It's just me with my computer, so don't worry about that. Okay, next piece. So if I did that, what's my show answer? So show next question, and this is the show answer. I'm going to switch back, and it's going to lock me out in a second. So it's show answer. That's what it's called, the show answer action. So I'm going to go back to Xcode, and I'm going to try and click drag, right? So from show answer, the show answer button. So click drag underneath my other IB action, and I'm going to call this show answer. Hey, it didn't lock me out. That's good. I'm going to still call it an outlet. I'm going to change it to action, right? That has to be changed, right? And notice how it says it's a UI button type event. I should probably specify UI button type. And click connect. And now you're going to get this. Now notice how there's two different ones. I've got here, which is any object, and here I've made it a UI button. Is that going to mess me up? Let me show you that again. So if I undo that action, right? So I undo, and if I try and type redo, right? So here's redo add connection. Here's my redo remove connection. And I'll do redo add connection. There's my add connection right there. Notice how both my connections are different. One has a sender that's any object, and the other one has a sender that's UI button. Right? I made it different on purpose. What is it? What is the code? What does our PowerPoint say? Any object, right?
Yeah.
So How can I switch that now? I made a mistake, right? And I'm going to go back to over here. And I've chosen the wrong one. I've chosen UI button because that makes sense to me, but it's different than this. How do I switch it? Can I switch it here? Can I just change this?
You can just change that because it's like a generic. Sort of
Sam's got all the answers, eh, guys? He's got all the answers today, right? Thanks, Sam. So if I go any object, and if I look through here, how come I can do that here? How come that's okay and safe to do? Because my sender, right? Remember, just like a sender, by the way, is the exact same word we use in Visual Studio. I have a sender object, right? Sender is almost like, what is the connection that I'm making? What is the button? And the sender is almost like my the current thing that I'm clicking on, if you will, right? So it's like almost like my context, my click context. If I click my button, that's the sender, right? Okay, so the sender object. Okay, cool. So I can easily change that. And if I run this thing again just to make sure if it builds, you always try and build and run to see what happens, and yeah, it's running. If there's a problem, you'll get a trap. Okay, cool.
So does it matter then if it's a UFO running?
I recommend that it does matter, right? It does. It's a different piece. It's a different. You'll get different options in the bottom. At least leave it as is what I'm saying. Okay. I know we're going slow, guys, but there's a reason for this, for my madness, right? Because you know what? You're gonna make your app for next week or the week after, and then you're like, oh my God, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it? And it's like finding a needle in a haystack. There's lots of little things here, like inside your UI, that you have an option to select, and you deleted something, now it doesn't work. Now you say, oh my God, my stuff is broken. It's not really broken. You just forgot to disconnect something or connect something, right? All right, so that's part of what it is. So I've got my view controller. I've control drag to get all that stuff, and I've got to program it and create a connection to my answer label. And this is what kind of the stuff the outlets look like. So my answer label has an outlet, and it talks about how we can look at the connection button, right, as an example, and it tells you all the outlets and all the received actions for a particular storyboard. So let's do that. So if I want to see all the actions for my storyboard, I'm going to go back to Xcode. I've clicked on my storyboard here, and I want to turn on the inspector as well. And with my storyboard selected, here's my storyboard selected. Notice how right now I only see my my view controller and my show answer, but I don't see the other ones. How come? Because my show answer is selected, right? And notice how if I want to get them all, right? And if I click on up here with my view controller, it's the whole view controller itself. Remember, this is context sensitive. Now when I click on this connections inspector up here, you're going to see additional options, right? You're going to see all my connections, and that's a really kind of high level way of looking at all your connections, making sure that they're all working well, right? So that's what we're doing here in the PowerPoint, and it's important to understand that difference. So if I click on a question label, I can see only its connection. If I click on the view controller itself here in the hierarchy here, then I'm going to see everything. Okay, guys, I know this is painful to look at, and it's like watching paint peel when I'm telling you, but I'll tell you these little details. When you do your first app, it's going to save your life, right? Because you're going to sit there and go, how do I make that connection again? And how did I do that constraint? And how did I do that? It's because you have to know how to do all this stuff. And yes, it would take you some time to learn, but it's going to help out. Okay, and it reduces some of your stress. Okay, cool. So we've done that piece. I'm going to go into the programming side, which is what I want to see, right? Okay, here. So what they've done here in our view controller is we've got our first piece of Swift in here. Like we don't have any programming so far in my two different methods that we've written. These little outlets. We don't have any kind of code in here, if you notice here, right? But as we go into the second piece, after it says creating the model layer, right? Here's the model layer that it does. Well, we need, and our model is just code and data, right? So here's our model. We'll take a look at how a question. Here's our question and answer, and notice how our questions and answers are the square bracket and string. What does the square bracket and string represent? Off the cuff, if you were looking at this.
Type.
That's how you declare an array of string. That's the syntax in Swift. Totally different syntax than we've seen ever in any other language. Typically what we do is, in JavaScript, it would be string and then 2 square brackets, right? String array, right? And in other languages, Java is almost the same. If you know JavaScript, then Java and C# almost the same, right? In terms of how we declare our arrays. Not so in Swift. Swift, you do this. Let, first of all, why are we making this a constant? because let represents constants. Why? How come? Why don't we make this a variable instead of a constant? Never going to change. It's our data, right? And you know what? We know if we know something's never going to change, the convention in Swift is, I'm reminding you again, hint, hint, this is a question on your test next week. If we know it's never going to change, right, might as well use a let, right? If I know something isn't going to change, what keyword am I going to use? Var, let, const? I'll make them up, right? You know, whatever it's going to be. And it's going to be a let. And the reason why we want to use let because it's type safe. And it also performs better. So when Swift knows it's a constant, it's not going to change, the compiler does something different in the background to make the actual application perform better with a known value. Yes, Sam, you had your hand up.
Sorry, how do I open the hierarchy?
So we go back, and I call this hierarchy or my again it's a bunch of stuff here in the view, but it's called something different. Let me just hide this. And down here, if you notice, if I hover over it, right over here, it says the document outline, right? If I click on this document outline, I can show and hide the document outline, right? Yeah. Any other questions before we continue? I'm talking about these things because when you put, again, I want to help you with your app. That's why I'm helping you with your app for your next assignment, right? That's what we're talking about here. Okay, cool. Going back to this. So again, it's talking about this stuff. So let's type this in. So I want to have a couple of things here. I've got my question label and my answer label, and I want to jump in here and throw in my questions and answer strings and make up some questions and answers. So example, in this particular case, from what is cognac made? And then the respective answer would be grapes, right? That's what it is. Cognac made with grapes, right? And notice how they also have another variable. In this case, it's a variable because it says current question index. Well, that's going to change, right? You're going to increment that current question index every time you press the button, most likely, right? So that's why it is a variable. And notice how we use a type right here next to it, int, to indicate the type. And we're assigning it right away. Again, in Swift, you do not use semicolons. You can use semicolons, but the convention is, and for people who are C, they know about C-influenced languages, then you would use semicolons, right? And it's okay. It would accept semicolons. For backwards compatibility purposes, it'd probably be okay. You don't need it. And the only time you'd need a semicolon is if you put two executable lines on the same line. So I have a piece of code, example, let, blah, 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 and then I have another one, something else, with a var on the same line. Then I could use a semicolon, yes?
So then, how does that really affect multi-line? Like you have a piece of code that you want to put on.
You can put multi-line code, and the thing is, it keeps on reading it, because the Swift compiler looks at the code and tries to decide for itself, when it looks at it, where the break in your code is. And if it can figure it out, right, then you don't need to use semicolon. If it's something that's multi-line, and if you have a problem reading it, Swift might have a problem compiling it, and there you might want to choose to use semicolon, but you don't have to. Okay? So let's put this in. So this is our model. Why is this our model? Because typically we model things differently. Well, we're saying, well, I have an array of strings for questions and answers, and I'm going to put in a few questions and answers. And the array, this is just the array syntax here. I'm initializing. This is my initializer for my array. Right? The array initializer right here is my first element of my array, or my 0th element, is from what is cognac made. The first element, the second element, like we normally have in other C-influenced languages. All right, so let's do that. So go in here and put them in. So again, I'm going to form up my questions and answers array, and they're both going to be string arrays. And let's see if I can come up with some errors for us to fix, right? Because I want to make some of these errors happen for you guys. All right, so I'm going to put them here, right? So these outlets, as an example, I could put kind of a comment that says, these are our, outlets. And, I could separate these as, these are our actions, right? Outlets and actions. And here, I want to put my model, right, for my array. And again, I'm going to create my two arrays, an array of string. So it's an array. I'm going to use my let keyword because I know it's going to be fixed, right? It's going to be a constant. And one of them is my questions, right? Here's my questions array. And questions is of type string array, right? So I'm going to put a string. And by the way, for types in Swift, you have to use capital. So it's not like some other languages like JavaScript, you use lowercase s. It's capital like it would be in Java, so string, right? So it's a string array, and we can initialize it. We're going to have a string initializer with the square brackets, right? That's the string initializer here. And then we're going to initialize it over multiple lines. So, you know, what is cognac made of is what the question is. Cognac, make a couple say cognac made of, made from. That's our first question, right? And you separate them with a comma. And then the next question would be, well, it's just going to lock me out now. What is 7 plus 7? Sure. I like that question. Right? Let's put that in. So I know this is watching PPO, but let's just do this. What is 7 plus 7? Right? And maybe put the question marks in there too. How about that? Right? And the other one is, the final question is what? What is the capital of? Vermont. What is the capital of Canada?
Toronto?
No.
That's on area. You're too much there.
Because we're not in the States. We're going to say Canada instead of that, right? Now notice I didn't put a semicolon in here, and for some developers they're going to go, oh my God, there's no semicolon. Tom, you're missing a semicolon. I'm not missing a semicolon. Let's do the next one. Let answers. We'll do the answers, and again it's going to be of type a string array. Notice it does help me write this, and I'm using the equals assignment operator, right, to put in the answers. What is cognac made of? The first one is grapes, right? And the second answer is 14, right? 7 plus 7. And so there's different options. They're all strings, by the way. And the third one, capital of Canada. What's capital of Canada? Ottawa, right? And that's enough, right? So I've got my, this is my model that I would normally have. So my answers, and so now you've learned how to make arrays, right? And how to initialize arrays with the array initializer syntax, square brackets, right?
If we don't declare the type, we'll just give it a generic object type. Or
Can't do it.
You've got to declare it.
Can't do it. It's type safe. There is no random thing. There's no open thing like that. Apple makes you declare the type when it comes to this. You're thinking about type inference. If I do one of these, will it work? Right? Can I do this? And if it errors out and it says expected element type.
Or type inference or lazy loading.
Right. If I put lazy, if I can put lazy in there, right? Actually, there's a lazy option, believe it or not, right?
Let's put any type,
Can't put any. It doesn't work, right? It has to put something in there, right?
any object.
Object.
Object, yeah.
Superclass.
Yeah, there's other things you can put. So if we mean object like this, right? Let's see if I can put that in, right? Object.
You have to spell it.
You have to spell it.
Object, yeah, object. I'll put that, yeah, there you go. And let's see if that works, right? And then it says, you know,
Any object. The word any object.
you're thinking any object, like this, right? Any object. And if I press Control Space, no completions, right? Any object. Will that work, Sam? Maybe. I'm not going to do that because it might mess us up.
Do it.
Just curious if you
Good.
could do that.
Sure, we'll see it later on. I'll change it later after we make our connections. Okay, let's go back to back to PowerPoint. So we've done this, and we've missed this. Var current question index is of type int, capital I, right? Which is equal to 0. We're initializing the integer here. All right, so let's do that again. So our current question index. So again, we're using var, the var keyword to declare a variable, and we're saying current question index. Oh, if I can type this in. And it's of type int. Notice the way we would normally do it is we declare the identifier, the colon, a space, and then the type. That's our best practice or our convention, right? And then we assign it to a value, right? Oop, see, now I put my semicolon there. It's my habit, right? Because I'm a C# Java, JavaScript developer, right?
So we always say var first instead of just declaring int.
Yes, we have to say the type. Is it a constant? Is it a variable? You have to indicate what it is. In Java or in C#, you don't have to indicate the type if it's not a constant, like the type whether it's a variable or a constant. If it's a constant, you have to indicate what it is. But unless it's a constant, you can just declare the type and you're good, right? And it assumes it's a variable. There's no assumptions here in Swift. You have to indicate what it is. Okay, cool. So we've got that piece done. And let's go back to this and see the other pieces that we have to get down. So we've declared an integer and a variable. Okay, here's some of our code. So here's our show next question index. hey, how come I'm using plus plus current question index, and why am I not using current question index plus plus? What's the difference? I asked this question way back. Yes.
That adds before it runs.
So
So
it adds before, it increments before we evaluate, is what you're saying, right? And then the other way, it evaluates before we increment, right? So it's post and our prefix. We use a prefix incrementer, so plus plus, and then the name, whatever the variable is. And we use our suffix. Suffix incrementation happens when we do the name and plus plus, right? And here what they're saying is increment your variable first. So go to current question index, and then compare it. Take a look at our conditionals here, right? We're learning Swift today, right? Our conditionals, hey, you would normally have in other languages parentheses here, right? No parentheses needed for Swift, unless you have a very complex conditional statement that'll make it more easily readable for you. That's the reason why we use it. Yes, what were you going to ask?
If the plus plus is first, then it returns the value incremented, right?
Correct. Right. So you increment the value and then you evaluate. You evaluate after the incrementation, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I use
Yes.
brackets if I want to.
Yes. You want to because you're C#, C,
That's right.
Java, one of those things. It bothers you not to use brackets, yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah. Try not to. I want you to do the Swift way. The Swift way, no brackets. So try it out. Right. So I want you to try. I know it's hard because you've
Live
never
on
done
the
it
edge,
before.
James, live on the edge.
Just like Lua.
And here it is. So if current question, I'm putting it up here for you guys to type. If current question is double equals again, questions now count. So we have a count instead of a length. All right. So normally an array, we think about an array dot length, and in here in Swift, it's an array dot count. The count method is what we use to count how many objects there are in the array. Okay. So just if you were going to question what it is, so that's kind of a difference right there. So that's one. So I think this is all understandable what we're doing up here. How about this piece? I'm declaring a local variable let question. Okay, I'm making it let, which means it's a constant, and it's a string type. And now I'm saying, I'm indexing my questions array, getting the value from that particular object in the array, depending on where I'm at. Right now it starts off at 0, the first value, right? And then I'm taking it and assigning it to this constant, right, inside my string, so question, right? And then I'm saying question label.text is equal to, I'm assigning it to this constant, right? So I'm just flipping it around. I could probably do it on one line if I wanted to, right? And here's my answer label.text. I reset to the question. That's what I'm doing. How come I'm using a let here, and why am I not using a var? How can I do that? How can I get away with it? I mean, if I'm changing the value and I'm doing this, how can that be possible? I mean, if it's a constant, yeah.
So it would be more of a local variables that method, and it's only constant in that
You're
method.
the only one that's answering for me, Sam, today, right? Maybe you're faster than everybody else. You're not putting your hand up, or if you're putting your hand faster than everyone else, I might have to give you a bonus because you're the one that's answering all the time, right? Even though sometimes you know how it is.
Do I get a bonus?
No,
Oh.
I have to put it out there, carrot and stick. Anyways, but the idea here is the reason why it's happening, why you can put a let in there is because that variable lives and dies in that local scope, right? So I can create it. And when is that local scope created? Yes. So every time I click the button, that local scope gets created. I have a container for my little program that I'm running. And then when I'm done clicking the button and it's done its actions, that local scope is destroyed. So I create the local scope. It's almost like I inflate my program when I click on a button, and then I deflate my program again when I'm done clicking the button. Right? I want you to think of it like that. I inflate the program because I do some stuff. I click the button, and then I deflate the program back to normal. Right? So I actually take more memory up for that single instance when I'm clicking on that button in Swift. Actually, it works the same way in Android. Right? So this is what it's doing. So I'm using a let because in this instance, that value will never change because every time I click on it, I'm creating a new variable, right? So that's why it's okay to use it, right? And don't be confused by saying, what the hell is he using a constant here for? I would use a variable in other languages, right? But in Swift, I want you to take it back that if you can use a let over a var, do it. That's the way I went. That's going to be probably a question on your test at some point, right? May not be next week, but I might ask that question. If you can use a let over a var, should you? true, false. And the answer is true. You should. If you can do it, if it's not going to change the, if that variable or that identifier is never going to change, it's more type safe and it runs better and faster if you use a let. That's the answer. Okay. IB action. Here's the next piece. This is something that you may run into. So let answer string is equal to answers. Notice I just get right from the answers context, and then I assign my answer label to the answer. This is very straightforward stuff here that we're doing in an IB action. Yeah.
If you don't have any minus in that, then it skips the first question.
If I don't have any,
You don't have a -1 or less, or just like go back one space because it's gonna equal. It skips the first question.
Yeah, because we're incrementing before we're showing the first question. So it starts with the second question.
let's see. Let's see what happens, right? So so current question index. I like your thinking. Let's put this all in. So if you guys haven't had a chance to put it in, I'll
No.
put it in for you.
I mean, Swift starts at 1. Yeah.
Let's see. Right. So again, I'm going to go in there and press it in this. So again, we're going to say, remember our current question index. I'm going to say plus, current question index. Hey, here's something else. Could I do something like this? What's the this keyword in Swift? I know I'm running 11:30 already. What's the this keyword in Swift? No, it's not this. It's self.
Self,
Right?
yeah.
So if I was to do it, could I do this? Self dot, right? And if I do plus, could I do this? Is it plus or is it plus self? So if I do self, if I was going to do a thing, can I do this? And it would be the current question index. Is that good syntax? Can I do that? How come it's underlining my code though? How come it's saying, hey, there's a problem? What if I'm doing this? It says edit all in scope. Here's my services and a bunch of stuff. How come I can use self and self points to this? So this is just another way of saying it. I don't have to use self. And by the way, the Swift way, if you can avoid using self, avoid it. That's what they tell you to do. Not so in C#, not so in Java, not so in JavaScript. But they tell you if you can avoid using the self keyword in Swift to simplify, to make it more human readable, avoid it. All right, that's the Swift way. So we're going to take it out. We don't need to use it here. We could, but we don't need to. Okay, cool. So we did this. And after we increment, we're going to check. So we're going to say, what's our if statement? If what? Just to remind, so we're going to go back to this. So if our current question index is equal to our questions.count. So if our current question index is equal to our questions.count, right? And again, we're just doing that. Then I always have to put, this is another thing, I cannot leave the braces away. You know how in other languages, in JavaScript, in Java, and C#, you could avoid using the braces for one particular executional piece of code. Can't do that in Swift. You have to use braces with an if statement. You have no choice. It makes you do it. If you leave them out, it will error out, right? Okay, so, and what are we putting here? We're saying our current question index goes back to 0 if it's equal to the question count. So current question index is equal to 0. We just set it back to 0, right? That's the first piece. And then after we've done that with our button, we're going to say let the question make a question our string, right? So we're make it a string type, and we're going to equal it to our questions, right? Our questions current question index, right? That's what we want to do, current question index. Sorry, it's kind of, I'm going to make it so you can see more of it. Actually, we don't even need this piece right now because we've already done the connections. So let us change some of the way we're looking at things. I'm going to bring this back up, and I'm going to kill my assistant editor, and I'm going to go back into my view controller, and that's all we can see. So we can save some space here a little bit. All right, cool. So my let question string is equal to questions current index. Hey, how come this is giving me an error? Let questions.
You're not using it.
I'm not using it. Is that the warning that I'm getting? Right. So initialization of a mutable value question is never used. Consider replacing with assignment 2 an underscore or removing it. See the underscore? Remember, it's almost like an optional. We're creating an optional thing. Now we haven't used it because we haven't had a chance to use it yet. We're going to do that right now. Question label.text is equal to question, which is the next one. So we're going to say question label.text. That's what we did last time, is equal to question, right? So that's going to take care of that piece, right? And the next part is our answer label.text. We're going to reset back to the question mark, right? So answer label.text is equal to the 3 question marks, if we can put that in there. So notice how it gives me our nice code hinting. And one more thing we have here on the bottom is we're going to use a let statement to create a string, answers, and we're going to pull from our current question index, right? So again, we're going to say, in this IB action, we're going to say let answer right, which is of type string, right, is equal to our answers, right, and then the current question index, right, because we want our current question index to, depending on where we are, make that the answer, right? Okay, now we assign the answer to the answer label. So our answer label dot text is equal to the answer, right? If I can actually type it in. Okay, so that's really it. That's in a nutshell. That's our quiz app right there. When we've explored, let's see why it's giving me an issue. Oh yeah, string with a capital S. And we've kind of done everything we can to make this. Let's test this out now and build and launch this thing to make sure that it works properly like it should, right? So we run this thing. I click next question. It goes to what is 7 plus 11. So you're right. It goes to the second question, right? And then, well, what's my show the answer? It's 14. Go to my next question. What's the capital of Canada? I probably spelled it wrong. And it's Ottawa. Let's go to the next question. What is cognac made from? And then it's grapes. So that all works now. And we're using that model, which is just a set of arrays that we use to hold our data, right? Now, this is a very simplistic way of doing things, okay? I'm going to stop debugging for a second and go back. So I'm going to go back to what Rich said. So what if I take away this thing and I make my current question index 0? Can I do that? So I want to take the plus plus away, and I want to change this to current question plus plus, but I don't want to put it there, right? My current question is 0 anyway. My current question index is 0 anyway. I want to take this thing, and what I want is I want to cut it, which I would normally do. And if I was going to program, I'd put it at the bottom. So every time I kind of hit a question, I want to do a current question plus plus, right? Which makes more sense to me, right? It starts at 0, goes to the next question every time you hit the button, right? Can I do it this way? And how is it going to affect my questions? Well, let's try this out. So I'm going to run it now. So build succeeded. It comes up. And when I click it, I should get my first question now, right? So what is cognac made from? And I click on, because, and this is why they do this, both of these, I have one current question index that is connected, right? So I want to increment the question, right? I want to do that, right? And I'm doing it, if I do it here or here, I increment my question to 1, right? So it's the same thing if I pull this one, and if I pull it here, right, as an example, and I pull it there, it's going to be the same effect as if I had the other way. And that's why they go to question 2 first, because then they're linked, they're synced. Is there another way you can think of coding this so that we don't have that out of sync kind of thing? How could I code it so that any other way of thinking about it? We're using Swift here, right? How could I code it? Now, if I run it this way, if I change the plus plus current question to current question index plus plus, and that will make no difference for me. I'll show you. So if I stop it and rerun it for a second.
You can put a plus plus on the if statement.
I could, but let's just see this. So I go next question, and I get 7 plus 7, and then show the answer is 14. It's this exact same effect that I would have if I went plus plus current question index. So I don't have to do it the other way. By the way, that's the Swift way to do plus plus current index as opposed to the C# way or C way or Java way, which is current question index plus plus. This is this way, and you'll see a lot of more in Swift plus plus question index, current question index, right? So tell me what I could do. If I put it in the if statement, well, that says, well, only if current question index is equal to questions count do I increment. Then that doesn't make any sense, right? So when do I increment? What about, the only one time I want to increment is when I've shown my answer, right? I could do that. Or I could have a separate current question index or an answer index as well. I have another variable that has a current answer index. My current answer index is 0, right? And the only time
Or you could just subtract 1 from the question index.
I could do that too, right? I could subtract 1 from the, there's different ways of coding this up, but the problem is we have 2 disconnected objects. I don't know when the user is going to click one thing or the other thing. And how do I keep track of both? I want to keep track of one variable, a sentinel variable, that affects 2 different objects that are unrelated. And I don't know when the user is going to click on them, right? Let's try this out. Let's see what I'm talking about here. So if I run this thing again one more time, and again, this is why this is a little learning app, right? Because there's a lot of little things here. What if I click the show answer index first? That shouldn't be allowed, right? How come I'm able to do that? I should not allow myself to click my show answer. Yeah. I could say, well, if I haven't clicked my next question, I shouldn't get my answer, right?
Can you disable the button?
I can. Yeah, I can. I can do all that stuff. So unless I get my next question, I can disable my button. And only when I click my next question will my button be enabled, and therefore I'll get the right thing. There's ways of controlling, and I like your thinking, right? I like your thinking about how do we do these things, right? Okay, let's stop debugging for a second, and let's. I think this is it for the PowerPoint. This is all the stuff that you would make. One thing that they actually added in is this in the Viewdidload. They kind of override this thing and they'd say they do one of these, right? They says in the Viewdidload they have a question label.text is equal to questions current index. And why would they do that? It says just after application is launched, you will want to load the first question. And the way to do that is when you want to load the question label with your question so you don't get that weird grapes thing. And that's how they load the first question. So it's a trick, right? So question label.text is equal to questions current question index, which would be 0 in our Viewdidload method, right? So let's do that. So if I go back to Swift, that's a way to do that. Here's our Viewdidload, right? And notice there is no Viewdidload. It's got to happen before here, right? So we're going to override. Here's our override, right? Our Viewdidload. And look, I have a choice of what to load here. I can say my Viewdidload method. And I can put my code in here for my override. And all I'm going to say is my question label.text, right, is equal to questions. If I can put this in. And then the current question index. Because that would give me my first question index. It starts off at 0, and it's going to, as when the view loads, it's going to load it up. Tyler, is that a question, or is that just your hand stretching?
This is my hand.
Awesome. Cool, cool. All right, let's try this out and see if it works.
We're doing with the Viewdidload.
I'll show you in a second. And now you see what is cognac made from, and I can show the answer right away, grapes. So I never have a question that's kind of in limbo like that, right? So think about your Viewdidload method as the starting method. It's almost like in the event lifecycle. When we start off with two functions, Viewdidload and the other error message thing, right? Our Viewdidload is our start method. It's the first method that fires.
The page load event in a .NET.
That's right. Page load event, or it also could be the on Android. There's another similar event that when Android it loads, when the page is created, right? Then it fires. It triggers this event. So this is the first event that triggers.
Yeah, I'm getting triggered here. It's triggering, man. It's triggering me.
The rest is just they talk about other things you can do for building the application, right? And how you can build and run the application, and talking about your application icons. Again, I'm not going to go into that today, but it's definitely going to help you if you read this thing and look how you can put your application icons together for your application. All right. So that's what this next piece does, and how to create a launch screen and stuff like that. So really cool things here in our first little application. So it's going to help you. This first PowerPoint actually is going to help you with your application. So I'm going to share my assignment details with you later. It won't be right now because I want to talk about Playgrounds 1%, because today is all about Swift, right? And so please look online. Your assignment details. Remember, it's going to be to build a calculator app. The assignment details. There's no tricks to this assignment, by the way. So look for this assignment later on. It'll be up on Blackboard right now. I'm not going to go into it now from a time perspective. But let's take a look at Playgrounds really quickly, okay? Because I want to talk about Swift and Swift Playgrounds, okay? We have another PowerPoint we didn't get to today, and that's fine. Let's close this app project down for a second. So we're going to say project, close project. We're pretty much done with as far as I want to go to today. Quit my simulator. And I want to pull up in my Xcode, I want to pull up a new playground. I'll start a new playground here. And playgrounds are kind of really cool way we can explore things like to do with Swift, right? I can choose a name for my playground. So we're going to call this, my playground will be called COMP3025 as an example. And it'll be, we'll call it a lesson 2 playground. Right? We can call it whatever we want, right? And I want to definitely use iOS as my platform. I could choose OS X or tvOS. Those are the options we have right now, right? So I'm going to leave it as iOS. Right? And press next. And it's going to ask me where I'm going to put my playground, and I'm going to leave it in my Xcode projects. That's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to click create. And there's my playground. Notice how I have my UI kit that I start off with right away. And when we want to try and understand Swift or play around with Swift, that's why we have this thing. And if I want to try things like with my view controller, my UI kit is cool. But do I need my UI kit to fool around with Swift? The answer is no, right? So let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it all. Let's kill it all. All right, and I'll save it. And let's talk about some stuff we've learned. We know that the var keyword assigns a variable name. And the variable name, if I go into it and I say something like my variable is my name string, my name, and if I assign it a string like Tom, right, as an example, I know right away, looking on the right-hand side, there's in Playgrounds, it gives you kind of an executable right away, right? The answer is it inspects my name variable to see what type it is. This is called type inference. So name, to be honest with you, is a string now. Because I've assigned it, I can do that in Swift without indicating the type, right? Now you might say, well, that's like JavaScript, and like Rich said, well, can I assign anything I want to it or whatever afterwards? The answer is no, you can't. Once you assign it, if I try and assign a number to it later on, like name is equal to 1, as an example, then it'll give me an error, right? And the error that it'll get is, cannot assign a value of type int to string, because this, as soon as we do this, we make an assignment, it uses type inference to associate a type to the variable, right? Okay, that's one thing. So we can't do this like we can in JavaScript. JavaScript doesn't care. It's loosely typed and it doesn't matter, right? But in Swift, not so. It's type safe, and that's the one thing we learned today, okay? The other thing is the idea of let. And if we can do let, is my name ever going to change? The answer is probably not, right? So if it's probably not, you're going to use a let instead of a var. And I want you to think of that in the framework of Swift. If you can use a let constant over a var, that's the preferred method, right? From a performance perspective, from a type safety perspective, this is what they're trying to show you, right? I don't know, I might start using constants in my code too, everywhere else, just because it makes sense, right? That's one. When we do strings, we talked about strings today, and when we did a string, so we have our, a question string as an example. We did this, and we did a question string. Again, the way we do it is we have to annotate it as a type of array, string array as an example. Sorry, that's what I meant. And then we have to indicate the type, string, right? Now, I don't have to, for our questions array, and notice how it's erroring out. Why is it erroring out here, right? Questions, and it's a string, and how come? What is it saying? Consecutive statements on a line must be separated by a semicolon. Well, they're not on the same line, right? Here's one line, and here's another line. How come it's giving me that, right? Well, it's interpreting what I'm trying to do in one line. It's thinking that this is two lines, right? How come? I'm not using var. I didn't use var or const. I have to use or let. I have to use let, and then it would take away that issue. If I try and do something like JavaScript, which you don't have to use var in JavaScript. If you assign a variable, var is assumed in JavaScript. You can get away with that. Not so in Swift. You have to use let or var. Yes. Oh, semicolons you mean? Or commas? Oh, no, there's no performance difference. I can put them all on the same line, is what you're saying. Yes, no performance difference. It's fine with that. If you wanted to put let, name is equal to Tom, question is equal to string, you can do that. The string initializer, and I know we're running out of time, is this equal sign that we learned about. And you have to use the square brackets in order to initialize a string. So, first question, as an example, second question will be the second one. Second question, whatever it is, right? This is the initializer. So this piece is one way to initialize. Notice how in the sidebar over here, you see what the value of my questions array is. That's what this does. That's why it's really helpful to do things in Playgrounds, right? We also saw something else. Another thing is functions. So we use the func keyword to create a function call, right? So we say func, let's say my function, right? And we have to use, in here we have to use parentheses for my function. You don't use parentheses for conditional statements, but for functions you have to use parentheses. And then if I have some kind of return, let's say my function is going to return a number or a string, I have to put that in. And if I put that in there, I have to have a return statement in there. It kind of forces you to return some kind of string. Does that, right? It makes you return that kind of string, right? So if I have a return. If I pass in any kind of parameters in there, my first parameter that I pass in there, let's say I have to name the type of parameter. So if I pass in there a string, like for example my name, and I have to indicate that it's a string. I have to indicate that it's a string, right? Now, notice that if I call my function, I can call it like this, my function, and then it's telling me that it's a name string, but I can put in my name as Tom, right? No problem, right? I can do this. Not so with whatchamacallit, a second kind of, not so with a second parameter. If I ask for a second parameter, for example, age, and I call it, I don't know, some kind of float or double, let's say it's a float, right? Well, this will fail, first of all, because now my function requires 2 parameters, and you'd be forgiven to think that you can do one of these, right? A nice number like, 30.5, right? And that you think that was okay, but it's airing out. Why?
You put like F at the end.
Hmm?
You have to
No, it's not that at all, Sam. You think it would be, but it's not. You have to do one of these. And that would take away the error.
What if you put name in front of Tom? That error as well.
No, you can do that if
Why
you
is
want
that
to.
for the-
You can do that as well, you can float, or
No.
you have multiple.
If you have more than one parameter, the second and consecutive parameters all have to be named
Something you can do
in a
any
method.
order?
Yeah? Huh?
You can do it in any order that way?
Yes. Right? So that's why I wanted to tell you this is why you can have conditionals. That's why conditionals work so well, because if I have a conditional, or sorry, an optional, I have an optional parameter that I take into a method, right? If I pass it in, I don't have to have separate method signatures. I can have a method that says I might get this thing or I might not. And therefore I can name which one I'm passing along, as opposed to Swift trying to figure out which one you're passing.
So could you pass age as the first parameter and name as the second?
Well, let's-
because you've named them?
Well, let's see. First of
They'll
all,
have to be in the same order they're declared in.
take a look.
Function
I am getting an error, right? See, it says, what's my error here? It says extraneous argument label name in a call. And it says, this is my fix, take the name out, right? So with my first one, right? But let's say, for example, my name is an optional, right? How do I create an optional, right? Where do I put it? On the string or on the name? Name, right? So I make it an optional, right? If I was to do that, now I've got a bit of an error, right? It says, well, here it is. It says, unnamed parameters must be written with empty name underscore. Fix it by inserting this underscore. So let's do that. Okay, good. And that's what you get, right? This is kind of a weird, you think, okay, well, it says expected parameter type of under the name. So it's not understanding this thing at all, this empty parameter right here. So how do I make an optional, right? How do I do that?
Get rid of string maybe?
Okay, I could do that too, but that would be, I need to type it somehow. So let's just type it by itself. So I say name, and I want to make it an optional parameter. Can I do it this way? Is it this?
Oh,
Name,
it's name colon string question mark.
name colon string,
Question mark.
right? And then question mark. Can I do that? And that's the answer. That's the way. That's the syntax right there. So here's my name, and now it's optional. So if I do this, right, and I don't pass along my name, do I have an error? Yes, I do. Why? Missing argument type of parameter number 1 in call, right? So even though it's optional, right, I can't put an optional parameter first. I have to put any kind of other parameters in there first. It's an optional parameter. I might get something, I may not, right? So that's one thing to know. If I was to rearrange this stuff, so let's say I move this around, so I put age here, right? And I put my optional parameter afterwards in the call like this, and get rid of this. Would that work? Here, let's check this out. So I'm going to save this one. Oh, I still get an error. What's the error? It says missing argument for parameter name in call, right? So even though it's nothing, it's optional, it still requires it if I put it in here. So just FYI, you're going to see a lot of this weird function methodology, the stuff. Once you put it in there, I can create a separate method, my function overload, where I don't have a name, right? Like we normally would see. So if I sit there and go, here's my age, and I'm passing in Tom again for this one. And if I write another function with the same name, and then I'll let you guys go. Sorry. Called my function, and I pass in a name, which we'll call the name, right? Because I don't have that anymore. So I say my name is equal to, is a string type, so it's a different parameter, and I don't return anything for this one. Can I do that? Right? I can. I have two overloaded functions, overloaded methods, with different signature types, just like we normally have, right? And then if I pass this in, it's available. It's good. So, is Swift different? Yes. You think you know it, but you don't. Some things don't work properly. And we're going to go over some more of the nuances. I've put up a PowerPoint presentation for you guys for all about Swift. It's up on Blackboard. I'm going to take it more up with you, but I'd like you to take a look at it because I'm going to ask you questions about Swift on your little test next week. Okay? So please look at that PowerPoint. I'm going to ask you questions from it. I've covered some of it already, and the parts I've covered, I'm going to ask you questions on. The parts I haven't covered, we're going to take up early next day. Okay, when we get together.
And this is a different PowerPoint from what you showed today?
PowerPoint 2, which is under week 2 in your up on Blackboard. And Rich, I'll give you that one if you want it. Questions before we end for the day?
Yeah.
Yes.
Peter, how to,
Remind me.
it's for evolving loading back to Git.
Okay.
Because it keeps saying mine's out of date.
Okay. I'll come back to you and talk to you about that specifically. Anyone else have any questions? Huh?
Yes.
Don't say no more Git tutorials. I've had enough of them this week. All right. All right. So again, recap. I'm going to put up your assignment. It's going to be up on Blackboard later today. Take a look at it. All right. It's going to be very straightforward. All you're going to do is build a calculator. It's going to be due 2 weeks from today, February 5th at midnight. Right. Same day that is due. February 5th at midnight. So 2 weeks from today, from Friday, 2 weeks. Your calculator is going to be build a calculator. Even if you don't know the details right now. Like I said, I'll upload the assignment later. It won't be something that you're going to be afraid of. There might be some minor niggling details in terms of I want it to look like buttons. It might say that, but start building your calculator now. Okay?
Does it have to be a scientific calculator?
No, it's not a scientific. Basic buttons: plus, minus, division and multiplication. That's it. 4 buttons.
And numbers.
And some numbers. Yeah, numbers would be good, right? Otherwise, you couldn't do it, right? Guys, thank you so much. I'll see you next week.